Last week was Easter. It was the weekend we remember Jesus dying for our sins and rising again in glory on the third day. And then the night before Jesus died, he took a meal and he shared it out with his friends. And this is a meal that he used to teach them about what his death was going to be about. He was breaking bread and pouring out a drink so that he'd explain to them what his death was going to achieve. It was a breaking of his body so that a new way back to God could be made in his blood. And Jesus set this up as a thing for Christians to keep on doing forever. And we have, 2,000 years later, Christians have been sharing a meal of bread and wine of some sort. We call it communion, but it has lots of other names like the Lord's Supper or the Lord's Table or Eucharist, which just means giving thanks. At Southern, we've been in the habit of doing this about once a month. We get together in our biggest group, and on a Sunday morning we share bread and we share some juice. And we're due to share it next week, which raises a question. How do we do a meal online? I reckon it's worth briefly looking at 5 things about this meal that we call communion. 5 things this meal is doing before I talk about how we're going to share it. So all of these 5 things I'm going to mention, you can find them in 1 Corinthians chapters 10 and 11 if you want to look them up. But here comes 5 things that I reckon communion does. The first thing is it looks backwards. Okay, this is a looking backwards. It's remembering something. We're remembering Jesus' death and resurrection. We can still do that online. We can do something that remembers Jesus' death online. Okay, that's the first thing. It looks backwards. The second thing is it looks forwards. We proclaim Jesus' death until he comes. We're telling the world about Jesus' death because we're expecting him to come. I can still expect him to come while we're online. Third thing is we look inwards. As we approach this table, as we approach this meal where we're having a share in Jesus' body and blood, we look inside and look at where we're at. Fourth thing is we look upwards. We thank God for sending Jesus. And all of those I reckon we can still do online. But the fifth one is the challenge. Okay, this meal is one that looks outwards. Okay, when we're Christians and when we gather together, we have this meal. We're looking at the Christian sitting next to us and saying, I've got fellowship with you. I'm acknowledging that I need a share in Jesus. I need a share in his body and his blood. And you need a share in that as well. We all need a share in that together. We're all sharing in Jesus just like we share from the one loaf of bread. That is really, really hard to do online. I actually don't think there's any way that we can do that perfectly. I'd much prefer that when we do communion, we have the symbol. We have a loaf of bread, a chunk of bread with us that I tear a bit off and you tear a bit off as we share this meal together, saying, I need some Jesus, you need some Jesus. We both have a share in Jesus, just like we share in this one bit of bread. So I don't think there's any way we can do that properly online. But the bread isn't magic. Okay, I reckon it's still worth keeping up the practice, even if we can't do it the way we'd love to do it. And to try to preserve as much of the table fellowship idea, much of the being together, the having a share together, in order to preserve as much of that as we can, we won't do it on YouTube when we do it. What we'll do is we'll have our main service on YouTube, just like we are now, but then towards the end, we'll suddenly all turn off YouTube and we'll jump into our live video chat called Zoom. That way, what we can do is we can see each other's faces and we can share it all exactly at the same time. You're going to have to bring your own bread and drink. I'm flexible on exactly what you bring, but you need to bring something to represent Jesus' body and something to represent his blood, something you might share in a meal. You need something that you can say, I need a bit of Jesus. I need Jesus, not a bit of Jesus, I need all of Jesus. I need his body, I need his blood. I need a share in what he's done on the cross and in his resurrection. So that when we share the meal together, you can say, I need this, and I'm sharing it with all of you guys. So next week, if you want to share in communion with us, and I really hope you do, you'll need to get into Zoom. I realise that is a bit of a technical challenge for some of us. If Zoom is tricky, please get in touch with me and we'll get the Southern Christian Church Zoom team, the tech support team will be there to help you. Please get in touch. Help us work that out with you this coming week. We'll have a practice if you like. And even if after we try that, you can't get in at the last minute, something goes wrong, please don't fear, okay? Missing out on communion does not mean you're missing out on a ticket to heaven. Does not mean you're missing out on your relationship with Jesus. You are still just as saved before as you will be afterwards. Communion is not your ticket to heaven, only Jesus is that. But communion is a really healthy and edifying thing for Christians who want to keep on trusting in Jesus. Okay, and I'd really encourage you to make the effort to join us in that next week. So next week we're going to do that. That's how we're going to do communion online. Not in YouTube, but in the Zoom chat. I'd love you to come and have a chat with me if you have any trouble with that.